What's happening, guys, and welcome back to the channel. For today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the Transformers Studio Series Gamer Edition War for Cybertron Deluxe class Cliffjumper. Now, whilst officially he made his first appearance as part of the War for Cybertron DS game, it really wasn't until Transformers Fall of Cybertron that we got our first proper look for this version of this character, and I believe the design team have already gone on record to say that the head sculpt this figure has is directly based on how he then would appear in Transformers Fall of Cybertron. So I guess technically this is our first Studio Series Fall of Cybertron release, and I'm hoping not to be the last, because personally I think even with some characters, their Fall of Cybertron updates were even better when in comparison to their War for Cybertron designs. And it is the video game that had the Dinobots and the Combaticons, which when would combine would form Bruticus, and that is a combiner which I am so hoping they update, because whilst it was my very first combiner way back in 2012, unfortunately it really doesn't hold up too well when in comparison to some of our more recent combiners such as Devastator and Menasor. But anyway, here we have War for Cybertron Cliffjumper, and I think you guys will be surprised to hear that I actually really like this figure. I think in terms of all of the Studio Series Cliffjumpers that we've so far seen released, this is by far the best, and it does use the Gamer Edition Bumblebee as kind of a base mold, but personally I think that's one of the strongest Gamer Edition releases that we've had so far. But as we check out the face sculpt, it looks incredible because it is based on how he appeared in Fall of Cybertron. It's also very similar to how he would then show up in Transformers Prime, and personally I've always regarded the Fall of Cybertron video game in some ways to be a prequel to Transformers Prime, so to see the similarities to me makes complete sense. But yeah, that is such a fantastic looking face sculpt, and to be fair, the chest design looks awesome. I love the arms. I mean, I think this is one of the biggest improvements when in comparison to the original 2010 Bumblebee mold. I mean, they do look so awesome, and unlike the Gamer Edition Megatron, we do get accurate back kibble. You know, when you are playing as either Bumblebee or Cliffjumper, this is exactly what your perspective is. So yeah, really nice to see that they nailed the accuracy as far as this guy goes. And then as we come down here to the legs, I mean, whilst they're not the greatest, they're definitely not the worst thing I've ever seen. Pretty decent detail here for the side. Unfortunately, due to the way they've been engineered, officially you can't get a proper ankle pivot, but you have two options here. So you can either pop the ball joints off to kind of keep the filled-in crotch piece and swap them around, or alternatively, if you want to keep this guy in one piece, you can kind of mistransform him. So just pop the belly up, we can then rotate here at the waist and then swivel around here at the thighs, and whilst you do still have the hollow crotch, you don't have to pop any of the pieces off. And check this out, we now get some proper ankle pivot, which really does allow you to get this guy into way more dynamic poses. But that is pretty much Cliffjumper in a nutshell. Articulation for the most part is identical to Bumblebee, so I won't bore you guys, but what I will say is due to him now having a new head sculpt, because the back of the head is slightly thicker when in comparison to Bumblebee, the range of motion looking upwards is nowhere near as great. I mean, we still do get a pretty decent range going off to the side, so that's cool. But yeah, if you want him looking upright, unfortunately, the head is just going to bang into this piece. And if I did have one thing that I would definitely stress to you guys, it would have to be the quality control, especially throughout transformation. The ball joints packed into the shoulders like to pop off, but the backpack is an absolute nightmare. I don't think I've been able to transform this guy yet without this popping off at least once. So why they didn't think it would be a good idea to kind of shoot a pin through this piece is just completely beyond me, because there is one vital step during the transformation where you basically have to push the waist past this section, and yeah, it just loves to pop off, which is so frustrating. But besides that, a really nicely done looking figure. Now, as we check out Cliffjumper's accessories, we do get the same sword that came packaged with Bumblebee. I mean, fantastic looking detail, but for the most part, this guy is just a repaint. So it would have been nice had they gone the extra mile to maybe spruce up some of these details with a nice kind of Energon red, because correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe in the video game when you're using this in combat, it kind of has this pulsating Energon effect going on. So yeah, I don't think that would have gone amiss. But then next up, because this is War for Cybertron, the right arm is detachable, so we can smack on the plasma cannon. Now, much like the sword, this is identical to the accessory that came packaged with B, but very nicely sculpted. To be fair, my favourite out of all of his accessories. I think this looks pretty banging. And then finally, we get the Neutron Rifle. Now, whilst all of these accessories are great, they are all identical to Bumblebee's, and in those War for Cybertron / Fall of Cybertron video games, you would go through so many weapons. I mean, I think each character had their own individual weapons, so it's such a shame that at the very least they didn't go ahead and include his Neutron Assault Rifle, because because I think that would have been pretty badass. And yeah, I mean, come on, we need more weapons for some of these War for Cybertron / Fall of Cybertron characters, because to me at least it makes no sense to include the same weapons with this guy, especially as the main gimmick of some of these characters is to kind of swap the weapons out between all of the releases, whereas these are just the same as what we saw previously. Now, as we take a look at a few robot mode comparisons, here we have Cliffjumper alongside Bumblebee, and I'm actually super glad that we have this redeco, because back in the day, unfortunately, I was just never able to track down that original generation's Cybertronian Cliffjumper. But yeah, these guys look fantastic. I loved pretty much everything about those old War for Cybertron character designs, but something which really stood out to me in their robot modes was that all of them kind of had this energon veining effect going on. I mean, you can see some of it here packed into the shoulders of Bumblebee. Because Cliffjumper is this very dark, deep red, unfortunately that is slightly lost here with this figure, so I wish maybe they could have applied a burning orange. That would have looked sick. But yeah, these guys look fantastic, and now we have Cliffjumper. I'm really holding out hope for potentially a Fall of Cybertron Jazz, because I think that design for Jazz has got to be the best of all time. He looked fantastic. Here we have him alongside the live-action movie rendition of a Cybertronian Cliffjumper, and to kind of go back to my earlier point, hands down the best Studio Series Cliffjumper that has so far been released. It decimates this Bumblebee mold. I mean, damn, it is just so bad. The legs don't like to stay tabbed in, the neck looks like it's something ripped straight out of ET, and as we turn them here to the backs, I mean, this backpack is just horrendous. Probably one of the weakest Studio Series figures of all time. So yeah, this Gamer Edition version most definitely is superior. And then next up, here he is alongside the Earthrise / Studio Series 86 Cliffjumper, and am I the only one noticing a trend with some of these SS Cliffjumper figures? They are all pre-paints and repaints of Bumblebee. I mean, one thing I loved about Transformers Prime Cliffjumper was it was one of the first times where he had a distinctive robot mode design, and the character of Cliffjumper deserves to have his own unique body mold. So I'm hoping that if we ever see that character again in the future, unfortunately it won't be for live action, because we all know how he kind of died in the Bumblebee movie, that he has a very similar design to what we saw from Prime. But again, this is better in my opinion when in comparison to this version. Here he is with the Deluxe Class Gamer Edition Barricade, Voyager Class Optimus Prime, and it's really here that you can see the differences between the red plastic. I mean, what they've used here with Cliffjumper is super vibrant, super saturated, and incredibly kind of shiny, whereas here with Prime it was definitely darker and more of a matte finish. So in some ways I wish they had used the similar plastic that we're seeing here for Cliff on Optimus Prime, because that would have made him look way more visually appealing. But to be fair, they both look pretty sick next to each other. And then finally, here he is alongside the Gamer Edition Megatron. And bang! Here we have Cliffjumper fully transformed into his Cybertronian vehicle mode, and it looks sick. I mean, back in the day when I was younger, the top three were always Transformers Prime, the live-action movies, and those War for Cybertron video games, and I in particular loved the design of some of these Cybertronian vehicles, and this guy captures that perfectly. It does look awesome. I mean, in terms of the paint detail, for the most part, very similar to what we saw from Bumblebee in terms of where all of the paint ends up, although because he is primarily this time round cast in red plastic, they decided against painting the rear tail lights, which isn't necessarily a big deal, but they are saving money with this release. I mean, they didn't even give him new accessories, so I definitely don't think it would have gone amiss to have painted this rear window, because that really was one of the only big issues that I had with that original B release. But yeah, this looks fantastic. You can store a weapon here on the underside, and the other two here on the back, and all four wheels are pinned on, meaning that you can have him rolling out into the Battle of Cybertron, and you know what, you can even smack a blaster here onto the top to kind of give him a stealth form. So yeah, these vehicles are just incredible. I think so far one of the best things about this Gamer Edition subline for me is seeing these vehicle modes back on shelves as part of an updated 2023 release, because yeah, they are just so incredible in terms of their design. Now, as we check out a few vehicle mode comparisons, here we have Cliffjumper alongside Bumblebee, both fantastic looking vehicles. In terms of which one I prefer, had they applied a bit of black detail here to the rear window, hands down it would have been Cliffjumper, because in terms of vehicle mode, I do just think the red looks awesome. But again, Bumblebee looks fantastic. You guys let me know down in the comment section below, out of the two, who is your favourite. Here he is alongside the live action movie take on a Cybertron Cliffjumper, and here there's no competition. I can easily tell you guys that the War for Cybertron version is the better out of the two. I mean, just in terms of design, this looks way nicer in my opinion when in comparison to this design, and also feels much better. Plus, it has pinned on wheels than as opposed to these nasty mushroom pegs. Here he is alongside the Studio Series 86 Earth Mode version of Cliffjumper, so these two are very similarly scaled. The War for Cybertron Deluxe class Barricade, which when in alt mode is an absolute monster. This thing quite literally looks like a Voyager class in comparison, so yeah, I mean, look at that, and plus he has this massive kind of thruster on the back. Barricade definitely looks his best in vehicle mode. I love the way this alt form looks, but as you guys can see, this is how they stack up. Here he is alongside the War for Cybertron Voyager class Optimus Prime. Scale appears to be pretty identical to what we saw from the video game, so as a team so far, Bumblebee, Cliffjumper, and Optimus are killing it. I hope that in the future we can get a Fall of Cybertron Jazz, as that was by far one of my favourite Autobot designs between the two games. And then finally, here he is alongside the Gamer Edition Megatron. And as we now have quite a few War for Cybertron figures, I thought I'd just give you guys kind of my ranking so far. So honestly, I think Optimus Prime and Bumblebee would take first spot. I'm not too sure if Bumblebee should be higher than Prime or vice versa. These two are an absolute blast. Just because Cliffjumper is a repaint, he's kind of in the halfway point, but still a fantastic figure. Barricade has a supremely weak robot mode, yet a very good vehicle mode, but I have to put him in the worst spot. Just as in terms of articulation, you really cannot do anything with him. And then Megatron is second to last, just because the robot and the tank mode, personally, I don't think look too great, but at least in terms of articulation, besides the knees, you can get him into better positions when in comparison to Barricade. You guys let me know down below, how would you rank all of these 5 figures so far? And so, wrapping up on this review for the Transformers Studio Series Gamer Edition Cliffjumper. Personally, I really like this repaint. I mean, it is a fantastic redeco on the already great Gamer Edition Bumblebee, a mold which I regard as being the best out of the Gamer Edition subline so far. I think the robot mode looks very accurate to how he would then show up in Transformers Fall of Cybertron, and the new head sculpt is awesome. Definitely does throw me back to how he would also appear in Transformers Prime. I really only have 2 big issues with this guy, one of those being the lack of any new accessories. I mean, in those games, we go through so many different weapons, and that really is what helps to distinguish the characters from one another, is their firepower. So I definitely think he should have included new weapons, and also my particular copy appears to have quite a few QC issues, some of which I never encountered with my Bumblebee figure. In terms of a recommendation, unlike some of the previous repaints that we've seen as part of Studio Series, this is one that I would recommend to pick up, because in the video game, you do actually play as Cliffjumper. You know, he's not a background character. He does have a pretty substantial role in Fall of Cybertron. So yeah, I would definitely recommend it. If you already own Bumblebee though, perhaps wait for it to go on clearance, because I think out of the whole wave, considering most of them are brand new molds, 9 times out of 10 the repaint is always what's left on the shelves. So undoubtedly in a few months time, you may be able to find it on discount, which is even better. I'd love to get your thoughts on this figure down in the comment section below. What do you guys think of this review? And until my next video, I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.